Hello, Dynasty women. The biggest mistake men make is thinking a woman will always be there when they decide to come back. It's a brutal truth that many men only realize after it's too late. They walk away, thinking they have the upper hand, until they feel the cold, merciless absence of a Sigma female. And that's when the panic sets in. Here's a fact. Psychologists have found that people tend to want what they can't have. But with Sigma females, it's worse, because not only are they unavailable, but they are also completely unbothered. The usual tricks, manipulation, guilt trips, or fake apologies don't work. Instead, they're met with something men never expect: silence. And that silence? It's deafening. Suddenly, everything reminds him of her, the way she used to challenge his thinking, her quiet confidence, the way she disappeared like a ghost when she was done. He checks his phone. Nothing. He posts something subtly aimed at her. Still nothing. And when he finally musters up the courage to reach out, her response is either ice-cold or non-existent. At this point, he's hit with a painful reality. He didn't leave her. She let him go. So why do men come crawling back after hurting Sigma females? Let's dive deep into the cold, hard truths that make these women impossible to forget. Number 1. Other women. Pale in comparison. After a man walks away from a Sigma female, he assumes he'll find someone better, or at least someone similar. It's only a matter of time before he realizes that no one else even comes close. Other women might be attractive, fun, or even emotionally available, but they lack the depth that made the Sigma female unforgettable. Conversations with them feel predictable, their energy feels replaceable, and suddenly, what once felt exciting now feels basic. There's no challenge, no unpredictability, no sense of mystery that kept him engaged like before. The Sigma female didn't just occupy space in his life, she elevated it. She had a presence that sharpened his thinking, a mindset that made him question things, and an aura that kept him on edge in the best way possible. Other women might try to impress him, but she never had to. She simply existed in her natural state, and that was more captivating than any forced effort. At first, he might try to convince himself that she wasn't that special. He'll seek distractions, jump into new connections, and pretend he's fine. But it doesn't work. The more he engages with other women, the more obvious it becomes. They don't have what she had. There's no effortless confidence, no quiet intensity, no silent strength that speaks louder than words. Instead, there's neediness, predictability, and a sense of trying too hard. This realization creeps in slowly, then all at once. He starts replaying moments in his head, the way she would smirk instead of argue, how she could disappear without warning and never look back. It messes with him because he thought he had options, but what he really had was a one-time experience. By the time he acknowledges the mistake, he's already lost the game. Because while he was busy searching, the Sigma female had already moved on. Not bitter, not broken, just done. Number 2. His ego crashes when she doesn't seek closure. Men are used to a certain script after a breakup. Arguments, long emotional texts, late-night calls, and desperate pleas for closure. It feeds their ego, reassures them of their importance, and gives them a sense of control. But when a Sigma female walks away, she does the unthinkable. She says nothing at all, no emotional outbursts, no endless questions, no "we need to talk," just silence. At first he assumes she's processing things, that she'll come around eventually. Maybe she's just too proud to reach out. But as the days stretch into weeks and weeks into months, he's hit with a harsh truth. She's not coming back. His ego, once inflated by the belief that she needed him, crashes hard. He expected resistance, pain, and proof that he mattered. Instead, he gets the opposite. He realizes he was not as significant as he thought. The absence of closure leaves him in a mental loop, questioning everything. Did she ever care? Was he just a phase? How can she move on so easily? The power dynamic flips completely. While he thought leaving would make her desperate for answers, it only made him the one seeking them. He starts replaying their last moments together, looking for signs, for any indication that she was suffering. But he finds none, and that drives him insane. Without closure, he's left hanging in uncertainty, a place men despise. He realizes that he didn't break her. She simply accepted what happened, processed it in her own way, and walked away with her dignity intact. And nothing, absolutely nothing, bruises a man's ego more than realizing he wasn't the center of her world. He was just another chapter, and she had already closed the book. Number 3. She's a paradox he can't decipher. Men like predictability. They like feeling as if they understand a woman, what makes her tick, what makes her emotional, what buttons to push. But with a Sigma female, there was never a formula. One moment, she was warm and engaging. The next, she was distant and unreadable. She could be deeply passionate, yet completely detached, kind, yet untouchable, independent, yet alluringly feminine. At first, he found it intriguing. She wasn't like the others, and that mystery kept him invested. But over time, his inability to fully figure her out became frustrating. No matter how close he thought he got, there was always a part of her that remained just out of reach. He assumed that if he left, she would eventually break down and reveal herself, finally show that vulnerable, desperate side he never got to see. Except she never did. She didn't text at midnight, she didn't leave hints on social media, and she didn't ask for closure. Instead, she vanished from his life as effortlessly as she entered it, leaving him with one agonizing realization. He never truly knew her at all. And that fact eats him alive. Because if he never fully understood her, how can he be sure she ever even loved him? Did he misread everything? Was she just playing along? Was he just a temporary piece in a game he didn't even know he was in? This is where the desperation kicks in. He becomes obsessed with solving the riddle he once walked away from. He watches her from a distance, hoping for clues, trying to decipher what he missed. But the more he searches, the less he finds. That's when it hits him. The only way to truly know her was to have never lost her in the first place. And now, it's too late. Number 4. She had a presence that made him feel alive. There are people who come into your life and make a slight impact, and then there are those who completely change the atmosphere just by being there. A Sigma female is the latter. She doesn't just exist in a man's world, she electrifies it. Her presence is intoxicating, not because she tries to be, but because she carries herself with a rare, effortless confidence. She doesn't seek validation, yet people are drawn to her. She doesn't fight for attention, yet she commands it. She's fully alive in a way most people aren't, and being around her makes a man feel like he's part of something extraordinary. When he was with her, life felt more exciting. Conversations had weight, and every moment carried an unpredictable thrill. Whether it was her sharp wit, her ability to challenge his thinking, or the way she could sit in silence and still make him feel something, she brought a depth that made the world feel bigger, richer, more intense. But he didn't realize it at the time. He took it for granted, thinking he could find that same energy elsewhere. So he left, or worse, he made the mistake of thinking she'd always be there. And then she was gone. At first he assumed life would continue as usual. But slowly he noticed something unsettling. Everything felt dull. Conversations with other women lacked that same spark. The places they used to go felt empty. Even the things that once made him happy seemed flat. It wasn't that she had changed his world, it was that she had been the force that made it feel alive. Now, he's chasing a feeling he can't recreate. He tries new relationships, new distractions, anything to fill the void, but nothing works. Because what he lost wasn't just a woman. It was an energy, an experience, a presence that simply can't be replaced. Number 5. She wasn't his source of validation, and that was addictive. Most men are used to being the center of a woman's world. They thrive on being the one she looks up to, the one she seeks approval from, the one who makes her feel valuable. But with a Sigma female, that dynamic never existed. She didn't need his compliments, his reassurance, or his validation to feel whole, because she already knew her worth. At first, this was unsettling. He couldn't figure out why she wasn't seeking his approval like other women did. No excessive texting, no constant need for reassurance, no fishing for compliments. She could take or leave his attention, and that triggered something deep in him. What he didn't realize was that her self-sufficiency was addictive. While other women tried to win his affection, she wasn't playing the game at all, and that made him want her even more. There's an unspoken power in someone who doesn't need you but chooses you anyway. Every interaction felt like a privilege, not a routine. Over time, he got hooked, not on her attention because she never overgave it, but on the feeling of being around someone who was whole on her own. She didn't rely on him to feel beautiful, intelligent, or valuable. She was all of those things before he arrived and would remain all of those things after he left. But here's where he made the mistake. He assumed she'd always be there. When he hurt her, he expected the usual reaction: anger, sadness, a desperate attempt to win him back. Instead, she walked away without a second thought. Because she never needed him to define her, losing him didn't shake her foundation. And that's when he realized the real validation he had been chasing all along wasn't hers, it was his own. Without her presence, his own insecurities came rushing back, and he finally understood. She was never the one who needed him. He was the one who needed her. Number 6. Her absence exposes his own mediocrity. When a Sigma female is in a man's life, he doesn't always grasp the full extent of what he has. She elevates everything: his conversations, his mindset, his experiences. She carries herself with a quiet confidence that makes her different from the rest. But if he takes her for granted and loses her, that's when reality slaps him in the face. At first, he assumes he'll move on easily. There are plenty of women out there, right? So he dives back into the dating world, expecting to find someone who can match her energy, or at least come close. But that's when the contrast hits him like a truck. The women he meets aren't necessarily bad, but they lack something: a presence, a depth, an independence that kept him on his toes. Conversations feel surface level, interactions feel predictable, and the mystery he once had with her, gone. Where she challenged him, they agree with everything he says. Where she stood firm in her own beliefs, they seek his approval. Where she was effortlessly captivating, they try too hard to impress. Slowly the realization creeps in. It wasn't just that she was special, she made him better. She forced him to think, to evolve, to step up. Without her, he's just another guy. There's no excitement in his routine anymore, no intellectual challenge, no force pushing him to be sharper. He's back to mediocrity, and he knows it. And the worst part, he can't unsee it. Now that he's been exposed to what exceptional feels like, settling for anything less feels unbearable. He realizes he didn't just lose a woman. He lost the best version of himself that only she brought out. That's when regret kicks in. That's when he starts looking back, comparing, reminiscing. And that's when he understands some women aren't replaceable. Not because they're rare, but because they make everything else feel so painfully ordinary. Number 7. The scarcity of her energy is a harsh reality check. Most women seek validation, attention, and external reassurance. They text first, double text when ignored, and linger in a man's orbit even after he's hurt them. But a Sigma female? She does none of that. Her energy is scarce, not because she's playing a game, but because she genuinely doesn't need to be constantly seen, heard, or validated. She operates in solitude, moves with purpose, and engages with people only on her terms. When she was in his life, he didn't fully grasp the rarity of that energy. He assumed she was like the others, someone who, despite her independence, would eventually seek his attention, crave his presence, or at least make herself available when he decided to return. But when she leaves, her complete absence is suffocating. No late-night check-ins, no lingering signs of attachment, no attempts to remind him she still exists, just nothing. And that's when it hits him. She was never just another woman. The world is full of people who constantly put themselves out there, who seek connection at all costs. But a Sigma female is different. She doesn't need to be in social spaces to feel validated. She doesn't need to be in a man's life to feel whole. Her solitude isn't loneliness, it's power. Once he realizes how rare her presence was, regret kicks in like a gut punch. He took her self-sufficiency for granted, mistaking it for emotional detachment. He assumed she'd eventually resurface, just like everyone else. But she doesn't. Instead, she thrives in her quiet, untouched world, moving forward without hesitation. And the hardest pill to swallow? Once a Sigma female removes her energy from a man's life, he never experiences anything like it again. He can chase new women, surround himself with attention, and drown himself in distractions, but nothing will ever replicate the silent strength of someone who never needed him in the first place. Number 8, she doesn't chase, and that haunts him. Most men, whether they admit it or not, expect some level of pursuit after a breakup. They anticipate the late-night texts, the emotional pleas, the "I miss you" messages that reassure them they still hold power. Even if they have no intention of reconciling, knowing a woman is still emotionally attached feeds their ego. But when a Sigma female walks away, she doesn't chase, she doesn't beg, she doesn't even look back. At first, he assumes it's an act. Maybe she's just trying to play it cool. He gives it a few days, a week, maybe 2, expecting her to break, but she doesn't. She's silent. And that silence, it eats at him. He starts to wonder, was I not important enough? Did she ever care at all? The usual comfort of knowing a woman is still emotionally invested vanishes, leaving behind a psychological void he never anticipated. The truth is, the Sigma female never placed him at the center of her world to begin with. While other women might cling to a failed relationship for closure, validation, or the hope of rekindling something, she accepts reality and moves forward, quickly and without hesitation. She doesn't chase because she doesn't need to, and that's what haunts him. The fact that she didn't fall apart, didn't fight for him, didn't even try to prove her worth, it forces him to confront a reality he wasn't prepared for. He was never the prize. His mind spirals. Did I lose someone irreplaceable? He replays memories, overanalyzes old conversations, stalks her social media for any sign of weakness. But there's nothing, just a woman who moved on like he never existed. And that realization, it wrecks him. Number 9. He realizes he was never in control. Men like to believe they're in control, especially in relationships. They assume that as long as a woman is emotionally invested, they hold the power. If she's arguing, begging, or seeking closure, it means she still cares. And as long as she still cares, he feels in control. But when a Sigma female walks away, that illusion shatters. She doesn't argue. She doesn't fight for his attention. She doesn't even leave the door open for a future possibility. She just leaves. And that's when it dawns on him. He was never in control. The power he thought he had, it only existed because she allowed it. The attention he took for granted, it was never desperate. It was a choice. The moment she decides he no longer adds value to her life, she disconnects completely, with a level of finality that leaves him reeling. At first, he convinces himself it's temporary. She's just processing. She'll come around. He tells himself he could get her back if he really tried, but as time passes, he sees the harsh truth. He wasn't the one leading this dynamic. She was. She never chased him. She never needed him. She was there because she wanted to be, not because she had to be. And now that she's gone, he has nothing. No leverage, no control, no second chance. This realization isn't just painful, it's humiliating. Because while he was busy trying to keep the upper hand, she had already checked out. She was always the one in control, and he was too blind to see it. Number 10. She's the one that got away, and he knows it. Losing a woman is one thing. Losing a Sigma female is something else entirely. It's not just a breakup. It's a once-in-a-lifetime loss that lingers in the back of his mind forever. At first, he doesn't fully grasp what he's lost. He assumes he'll find someone else, someone who can match her presence, her energy, her depth. But as time passes, the painful truth sets in. There is no replacement. A Sigma female is rare, not just because of her confidence or independence, but because of the way she made him feel. She wasn't just beautiful, she was captivating. She wasn't just intelligent, she was unpredictable in the best way. She wasn't just independent, she was untouchable in a way that kept him constantly intrigued. And now she's gone. He tries to move on, but no matter who he meets, they all fall short. Other women may be kind, loving, even attractive, but they lack the mystery, the challenge, the effortless magnetism that made her unforgettable. Conversations feel repetitive, interactions feel predictable, and the spark, completely missing. That's when the regret sets in, the kind that can't be undone. She wasn't just another woman, she was the woman. The one who stood out from the rest, the one who made him feel alive, the one he didn't fully appreciate until it was too late. And now he has to live with the fact that he lost something most men will never even have the privilege of experiencing. Number 11. His friends, family, or even his new partner. Notice the void. At first he tells himself he's fine. He moves on, starts dating again, and pretends losing her didn't affect him. He convinces himself that life is just as good, maybe even better. But the problem isn't just him. The people around him start to notice the difference too. His friends see it first. Maybe they don't say it outright, but they can tell something is missing. He's not as sharp, not as driven, not as alive as he was when she was in his life. With her, there was a certain energy about him. He was more focused, more confident, more engaged. Now he's just there. His family picks up on it too. Maybe his mother casually asks about her. Maybe a sibling makes an offhand comment about how you were different when you were with her. They don't necessarily mean it as an insult, but it stings, because deep down he knows they're right. And then there's his new partner, if he even has one. At first, she seems great. Maybe she's everything he thought he wanted. But over time, the comparison becomes impossible to ignore. She doesn't challenge him the way the Sigma female did. She doesn't bring that effortless depth, that unshakable presence, that intoxicating mix of warmth and detachment. Even when things are good, they feel ordinary. The worst part? He starts to feel it too. He was better when she was around, not because she completed him, but because she elevated him. She made him think differently, act with more purpose, step up in ways he didn't even realize. Without her, he feels like a lesser version of himself, and that's when it fully sinks in. He didn't just lose her, he lost a version of himself that only existed when she was in his life, and there's no getting that back. Number 12. He thought he broke her, but she became even stronger. Men often walk away from a relationship assuming they've left a mark, that they've shaken her, broken her, left a wound that won't fully heal. It feeds their ego to believe she's struggling without them, even if they never admit it out loud. They expect sadness, regret, and a slow, painful process of moving on. But with a Sigma female, the story doesn't unfold that way. She doesn't crumble. She doesn't spiral. She evolves. While he's out there thinking she's heartbroken, she's quietly using the experience to level up in ways he never saw coming. She turns the pain into wisdom, the disappointment into fuel, the setback into a setup for something greater. She refines herself, sharpens her mindset, and steps into an even more powerful version of who she was before. And that's when he notices. Maybe he sees her thriving on social media, looking even more radiant, more confident, more untouchable than before. Maybe a mutual friend mentions how well she's doing, or maybe in a quiet moment of reflection, he realizes that while she's evolved, he's still the same. That's the real gut punch. He thought leaving would leave her weak, but instead he's the one stuck in place. She took the pain and transformed it into something extraordinary, while he remained stagnant, repeating old patterns, dating average women, and realizing too late that she was never the one who needed him. He didn't break her, he made her stronger. And that's a truth he'll have to live with for the rest of his life. At the end of the day, men come back after hurting a Sigma female because they realize, too late, that she was never like the rest. She didn't beg, she didn't break, and she didn't wait for him to return. Instead, she grew stronger, leveled up, and became even more untouchable. The absence of a Sigma female isn't just felt, it's a harsh reality check. He thought he had power over her, but she was always in control. He thought he could replace her, but no one else measured up. And when he finally understands what he lost, he's left with nothing but regret. But by then, she's already gone. If this hit deep, don't just sit there. Take action. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss content that tells it exactly like it is. Like this video if you know the truth hurts but needs to be heard. Drop a comment and tell us, what's the biggest lesson from this? And most importantly, share this with someone who needs to hear it. You know exactly who they are. This isn't just a channel. This is a movement, and trust me, you'll want to be part of it. Let's keep the truth flowing. See you in the next one.